pilots are still having these occurrences regularly, daily in fact, not just within the military, but within the commercial airlines. I think this first drop is really just a drop in the bucket of what they have. It's all risk and no reward, at least historically, but I think what's unique about right now is that there is reward. There's reward for all of us coming forward, sharing how often this is happening, sharing the safety incidences, so that your crew members on other aircraft can be safe and that we can all understand what's going on.
A UAP whistleblower is sounding the alarm about mysterious occurrences in the sky after the Pentagon released a stash of UFO UAP files. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the second hour of the Big Weekend Show. Those files released on Friday feature never-before-seen documents and videos of unexplained aerial phenomena. And some of the files go back for decades, including one event involving the astronauts of Gemini 7 in 1965.
Gemini 7, is that the booster or is that an actual sighting?
Yeah, we have several, looks like the three up there, actual sighting. We have very many, it looks like hundreds of little particles going back and west out about 3 to 4 miles.
Joining us now for tonight's big close-up is Florida Congresswoman and Chairwoman of the Task Force on the Declassification of Government Secrets, Paulina Luna. Congresswoman, thank you for joining us tonight. So as we looked over what's been released so far, it's a lot of videos, a lot of pictures, a lot of things that make you go, I wonder what that is. But I think in the age of AI and just what we can see on video now, I don't know that a lot of Americans are coming to any conclusion. I guess that's kind of the point of it. I guess my question to you is, in your investigation and some of the teasing that you and other members of Congress have done, apparently there's more stuff that's going to come out. Do you think this is going to get more kind of concrete or more conclusive, or will it continue to be, here it is, make of it what you wish?
Well, to be clear, all the images that you saw in that initial rollout on Friday, these are not AI-generated images. As you saw, even in that video that you just played, there are redactions. So this came off of either military observation, aircraft, etc. And then, obviously, in the next 30 days or so, in talking with the Pentagon, actually this Thursday, we will obtain these 40-plus documents by name that we at the task force have been specifically requesting. As far as more concrete evidence is concerned, I want to be very clear about something. All of the documents that you saw released per President Trump's directive this February, up until recently, these were considered classified. We actually weren't even able to talk about them without threats of losing our security clearances or being prosecuted. As you saw, the whistleblowers that came forward that did discuss it, there was whistleblower retribution. We've tried a number of times to either get disclosure in legislation, whistleblower protections pertaining to UAPs in legislation, and every single time we do, even though this is one of the most bipartisan, bicameral things in the country, we're stonewalled and we're blocked. And so I'm hoping that this will change the discussion of that Congress will move forward in providing protections, because we've also been told, whether or not there exists back engineering programs regarding this technology, whatever it might include. Our goal and objective is to, ensure that our taxpayer funds are not, being spent somewhere they shouldn't, B, that people aren't breaking federal law, and C, this is an issue of national security. And so based on our investigations, what I can tell you is I'm glad I can finally talk about it. Some of the documentation that you actually saw released this past Friday did include, up until recently, FBI investigations that actually took place here in Florida. And to be clear, we actually were working very closely with the FBI because they were one of the few government agencies that was actually taking this seriously. And based on what we're seeing, we've talked to other governments about this. There's more to come. That's all I'll say on that.
Congresswoman, I think you took me to my next question. Of course, I want to ask you what is there that's more to come. I want to get to the bottom of it. And thank you for the transparency that you've helped to push for thus far. Even looking at what we've been seeing in the last couple of days, going over these videos and the audio there from Gemini, it seems silly to hold some of this stuff back. So could you give us a hint about what's next? And does anything have to do with non-human origins?
Well, there was a very interesting and specific report that should have been released, or at least I saw the renderings that were released from the FBI investigation that was specifically taking place here in Florida. That was interesting because, as you saw from many of the witnesses that came to testify to our committees or in those hearings, they're talking about the way that these things are maneuvering and operating. They're talking about non-human intelligence. And again, it's not the job of the federal government to tell you what to believe, right? Like this, our job is to present this to the American people and ultimately at least ensure that people that are trying to bring this information forward aren't getting hurt in the process. But I do want to flag something that's been very interesting. From the time that President Trump did give this directive back in February, we did start to see an uptick in the random, although I'm not saying that they're connected, but very odd circumstances and disappearances of scientists that could help explain what these things are. I will end by saying this. We have been stonewalled. We have been blocked. We had witnesses intimidated. We had even former members of AARO, the director, actually attacking our witnesses. We were, attempted to be discredited in the media up until this release. And so there is a group of us, bipartisan and bicameral, and people within the intelligence agency that are pushing to ensure that this directive is met. But this would not have happened if President Trump didn't follow through on that promise. And so to him, I think that this is going to go down as one of his biggest legacies in transparency for the American people.
I think you're right about that one. Congresswoman, I want to turn to a different topic now, something I'm personally really passionate about. Last week, the House passed the Farm Bill, which includes that so-called Save Our Bacon Act. Now, you initially led the charge against it, saying you always stand with American farmers. I dug into this a whole lot. I want to see pigs out of gestational crates. I don't like that this nullifies a lot of state animal welfare laws. I believe the states have the rights to do that. I know that this fell by the wayside, and I know there are a lot of Republicans that wanted this in here. So you got to break this down for me, and if the fight on this is going to continue.
Yeah, so the number one thing for me, especially why I chose to fight on this topic, is, again, you had mentioned something very key, states' rights, right? We shouldn't be doing anything at the federal level that would remove the autonomy of states to decide what's best for their farmers and what their citizens choose to put on the ballot and then pass by law in that state. But more importantly, too, this provision actually enables countries like China, who currently own 25% of our pork industry, it gives them a massive advantage over American farmers. And from a perspective of not just is this healthy for the American people, not just a states' rights issue, but also, again, going into a national security perspective. And why should we be enabling countries like China that control a majority of this shareholder ownership in, Smithfield Farms, and then you have people on the committee that wouldn't even hear or allow our provision to strike this, Save Our Bacon Act from the Farm Bill. You're seeing them actually getting paid by these same companies that are owned by China. That's not actually that's not actually a way that they would be, benefiting or working on behalf of the American people. They're working for big corporations that are, benefiting countries that hate us. And so it was awful that they wouldn't even consider it. I'm sure you also saw that I took on Monsanto and we removed a pesticide liability shield that they were also trying to slip in there. But again, that didn't come at the expense of, I think, some of my personal relationships in Congress, where I was actually having members attack me on the House floor saying that I was a liar simply because I didn't want the American people to get sick because of pesticides and herbicides that we know cause cancer. And so issues like the Save Our Bacon Act, they'll give it a nice fancy name, but the only bacon it's saving is really China's. It's benefiting 100% of China. It removes states' rights. And our own Supreme Court conservative justice had said that, what California was doing with Prop 12 was not, anti-constitutional. And I'm not even arguing for Prop 12, but why is it that California is being singled out when you have similar provisions like in Minnesota, like in Iowa for hens, and they're not being targeted? So I just think that this was not a good hill for our Republican governing body to die on. Aren't Republicans supposed to be for limited government? And it seems like it was government expansion.
Congresswoman, I want to ask you about redistricting in your state of Florida. The legislature, at the behest of Governor DeSantis, just passed a new map with up to 4 new Republican districts. There are some questions about whether that was constitutional under Florida's constitution. I wonder if you have a position on that. And then on Capitol Hill, Hakeem Jeffries has been, pounding the desk a lot, talking about maximum warfare, F around and find out. He called you out by name, saying that the Democrats will be, quote, aggressively targeting you for defeat. as retaliation for this new map. Any response there?
Yeah, so we typically don't say the word redistricting during redistricting years because the Democrats will try to loop people in for a lawsuit. But I think that Governor DeSantis, was operating within his rights as governor to do this. And as you saw recently, the Virginia map was actually struck down as well. And so I think Florida will be just all right. You know, I was outspent $12 million to 1 in my very first election cycle. They fought really nasty last cycle. But Hakeem Jeffries, you know, he talks a big game. Meanwhile, he literally personally killed the banning insider trading bill that we were pushing that was bipartisan in Capitol Hill. He said, you know, maximum warfare, and then the same evening or same weekend that he makes that statement, there was a shooting at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. And, you know, this type of rhetoric doesn't change anything. But yes, I happen to be, I guess, a thorn in the side of many national Democrats and their operatives. But I happen to also be wildly popular because I am doing things like taking on Monsanto and pushing voter ID and banning insider trading. So good luck.
Love it.
Congresswoman Paulina Luna, good luck to you. Thank you for joining us tonight, and I can't wait for the next tranche of UAP UFO material to come out.
Thank you, guys.
Yes, ma'am.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.